In a city where the air hummed with the roar of furnaces lived two master glassmakers, Hatem and Nadim. Hatem was a man of cold precision, spending grueling hours grinding glass to a sharp, clinical perfection. Nadim, however, possessed a natural grace. Under his touch, molten glass flowed like liquid light. Hatem watched Nadim work with effortless humility, and a fire began to kindle in his chest, a heat far more destructive than any forge. It was the slow-burning ember of envy. One morning, a royal herald announced a grand competition. The Sultan required a masterwork, a chandelier for the great hall that would serve as the kingdom's beating heart of light. Hatem saw this as his moment of ultimate vindication, a chance to prove his technical superiority. Nadim, conversely, dreamed only of how to capture the morning sun in crystal. As they read the decree, Hatem's eyes burned with a restless, hungry ambition, while Nadim sparkled with pure inspiration. While Nadim spent his nights sketching, Hatem's young son Idris would often sneak away to Nadim's workshop. Idris was mesmerized by the magical shapes Nadim created. To the boy's delight, Nadim gifted him a tiny, iridescent glass bird. Watching from the shadows, Hatem saw his only son gravitate toward his rival's warmth. His heart curdled. He felt Nadim was not only stealing his professional glory, but also the very admiration of his child. The results were announced, and Nadim's victory was absolute. His design, a breathtaking lotus of interlocking crystal petals, was hailed as a miracle of art. Hatem stood among the cheering crowd, forced to offer a hollow smile that masked a predatory bitterness. That night, as the city celebrated with lanterns and song, Hatem sat alone in his darkened studio, tearing his own failed blueprints to shreds, convinced that Nadim's success was a personal insult. Work began on installing the massive chandelier in the palace. On the eve of the unveiling, Hatem used his knowledge of the palace's architecture to slip inside, undetected. He climbed into the high rafters where the heavy iron support rings were anchored. With a hand trembling from hatred rather than fear, he began to file through the main chain link. "Your masterpiece will fall, Nadim," he whispered into the dark, "and your name will fall with it." The night of the ceremony arrived, and the great hall was filled with the elite of the city. Hatem stood in the front row, dressed in his finest silks, with Idris at his side. The boy was jumping with excitement, eager to see the star his friend Nadim had built. Hatem watched the chandelier sway almost imperceptibly, waiting for the moment Nadim's pride would turn to ash. He did not notice that Idris had slipped his hand free to move closer. Suddenly, a sharp metallic snap echoed through the hall. The crowd gasped as the central chain gave way. Idris, in his excitement, had run directly beneath the center of the lotus to see its heart. The massive chandelier plummeted like a falling star, shattering against the marble floor with a deafening roar. Thousands of razor-sharp shards erupted in every direction, turning the beautiful light into a storm of glass. A terrible silence followed, broken only by a scream of agony. Hatem lunged through the dust and broken crystal to find Idris collapsed on the floor. A single jagged shard, a piece of the very chain Hatem had weakened, had struck the boy across the face. Idris's eye was lost to the dark. Hatem let out a cry that shook the rafters, realizing too late that the weapon he had aimed at his friend's heart had struck his own instead. The investigation was swift. The marks of the file were discovered on the broken link, and Nadim was accused of criminal negligence and fraud. Nadim was led away in heavy chains, sentenced to exile from the city he had hoped to brighten. As he passed Hatem, Nadim offered only a look of silent, sorrowful confusion. Hatem stood broken, hiding his face in his hands, crushed by a guilt that no amount of glass could ever reflect. Years passed. Hatem now lived in a silent workshop, surrounded by dull, unpolished glass. Idris grew into a young man in the shadows, the silver scar across his eye a permanent testament to his father's crime. Hatem had achieved his victory. Nadim was gone and forgotten, but the cost was his son's sight and his own soul's peace. He finally understood that envy is a fire that consumes the hearth it was built to protect, leaving only cold ash behind.